before that time would happen, some of our people had to go inland to protect the ways and to take the sacred objects inland, to protect them until it was safe. That was with the Anishinaabe people. So when I was a little girl, even before I could speak English, I only spoke my language. I was 6 years old when I first started speaking English in grade 1. And I told my dad, I know that there's still Native people that pray in the old ways somewhere. I couldn't see evidence of it. It was all taken away from our people. And so when I was a young girl, like my spirit knew, when I was a young girl, and I went to my very first ceremony with the Anishinaabe people in Manitoulin Island, the person that spoke this morning, the elder Jim Dumont, he was there, and his wife, and others have passed away. He was there at my very first ceremony. And I cried through my whole ceremony, and I said, here it is what I knew, what I told my dad, and I couldn't wait to come to tell my dad and bring this home to my people, what had been taken away from us. So I knew it was part of prophecy when I think back now. Oh, that's his service dog. And so we had to, so these ways, when they start to come back, there was a few, you could count on one hand in all of the Maritimes of Atlantic Canada and Maine, how many people were following traditional ways. So, but I found 4 men. One was my dad, and one was the father of my child. And we went to the burial mound before sunrise. And a very simple ceremony, the ancestors told me, have them build a little fire in the center, have one man stand at each direction, and just as the sun is starting to come up, starting with the man from the east, going off a little tobacco to that sacred fire. And they did that. And I just listened. I just sat near a tree. I'm pregnant, and I'm sitting near a tree and just listening to spirit. And we did that without question. And then later, that ancestor started coming back. Next time, 4 days in a row with specific instructions. So since that time, I have been taught, I have been trained to do, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more soon, but I want to tell you how I tell people, my dad went to residential school from the age of 6 till 16 when their parents died. Him and his 4-year-old brother and his 8-year-old brother. And they were taken to that school. He was there for 10 years until he ran away. And he lied about his age, joined the army at the age of 16, and he went into war. He would rather go to war than remain in that school. So I tell people, you can cut our hair, you can punish us severely for speaking our language, but you can never kill a spirit. And I know that I'm one of the living proofs of that, as there are many of us. So I'm going to hand this talking stick to my spiritual brother, David Seni Passon, and he's going to hand it up. Say something.
Welcome. My name is David Lone Bear Sanapas. I'm from a place far from here. I spent most of my time on a mountain, being by myself and being just, everybody says one with nature, but being one with nature is only an hour. After that, you have to survive. So I've been on this road for a little bit, over 50 some odd years. I traveled across Canada and parts of the United States offering star teachings to whoever who would listen. I've been to a lot of the reserves in Canada and the United States offering these star teachings, and spent a lot of time doing that. Not much for words. My apology, I haven't mastered the English language yet. I'm working on it. I've been here this weekend, asked to deliver a prophecy tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. If you can come, it'd be really important, because everybody thinks prophecy is doom and gloom, bad things like that. Some of them are, but prophecy deals with everyone, all the spectrum of colors of the world. But people don't realize that the natives are protectors of the earth, but we have other protectors of the universe and stars and stuff like that. So my suggestion, cancel everything to be there, because you're not going. Nobody's ever going to hear what I have to say tomorrow night, and it's already written. But this is the first delivery of this prophecy. So
and you'll tell
thank
us
you.
later what room.
sorry?
She's trying to find out what room now. Melody's trying to find out.
Okay, well,
Okay.
My suggestion to bring somebody with you. People don't really realize that when prophecy happens, you don't go through it alone. You want to bring at least 3 people with you, because the natives believe that they've been reincarnated over and over and over again, and there's no end to reincarnation. If somebody's not reincarnated 7 times, 8 times, it's over trillions and trillions of times. Your spiritual memories, what you have now, is the only thing that you can handle in this world. Everybody's looking for who they want to be, who they was. I think that we have to realize who are you now? How can you help the communities? How can you help your families? How can you help the world? People depend on too much on ceremony and things like that. Ceremony is important. The ceremony is a reminder of who we are, and we don't realize that. You can do ceremony until you turn blue, and it won't work unless the spirit's involved with that ceremony. So that's why important lesson I learned from Donna. Donna and I have been meeting each other on the spiritual work in the last 40 years, and we've been friends, and I think we're relations somehow, my mom said. So, but thank you for coming here. It's very important to get all the information before you can come up with an answer. I've been traveling around the United States and Canada, speaking to different communities on the Star Teachings. The Star Teachings comes from the Mi'kmaq, the ancient ones, but the ancient ones want to deliver this to the world. And that's what I've been doing the last 42 years. I've been going to different places speaking. And if you find me here today with my trusted wolf, he's really a border collie, but he thinks he's a wolf. Yeah? Come and talk to me, because it's important. It's very important. Nogama.
Aloha no kākou, o Edward Hale aloha iau. He keiki a Reynolds le aloha iau, ku makua kane. Me ka noa hine o Maramoa ni ki ala ka eo, ku makua hine mai olehua Molokai mai au. My name is Hale Aloha. I come from the island of Molokai, and Reynolds and Maramoa, my parents. For the last 29 years, we have worked in the area of repatriation, both nationally and internationally. We were created out of anguish. Our organization, Hui Malama Ina Kupuno Hawaiine, was created in response to the gross disinterment of over 1,100 of our ancestors on the island of Maui, a place called Honokapua. But from that anguish and from that darkness came enlightenment, came an understanding of our what we call interdependent relationship with our kupuna, meaning that we are duty bound to take care of them, and they are duty bound to take care of us. And the care from our kupuna will not come unless we do our part. And we had no idea when we started in 1989 what the extent of the problem was. We thought we were just trying to prevent further desecration of a burial site. We had no idea that, in the years previous, in the century previous, that foreigners had been coming to Hawaii and removing our ancestors to institutions and private collections all around the world. So when we started, we had no idea what the true extent of the problem is. And frankly, if we knew, then probably most of us would never have continued. Our training was intended to restore to what was once instinctual to us, that we had forgotten or been separated from. And so for our kumu, our teachers, it was explained to us that we were returning to who we are, not were, because we will always be descendants. We'll always have this relationship. It was for us to understand how to express that in the context of desecration, of grave robbing, of the undermining of our dignity. And as hard as this work has been, we've repatriated close to 6,000 of our ancestors. on the one hand, while that sounds like a positive thing, the harsh reality is that we had to learn to protect ourselves physically, psychologically, and spiritually from the harm that comes when you realize that your ancestors were treated or mistreated and were stolen, and the negative impact that can have on one's spirit, on one's character. So part of our training was understanding how to protect ourselves from that. To protect yourself is one thing, but you're not completely isolated from it. The harm is there. The notion that your people aren't even considered human in terms of dignity and respect. And so that, a large part of our work is understanding that this negative energy demanded a seat at the table. And our training included how to manage it properly so we could function without being overwhelmed by anger and despair. So it's been a long road. When I started, I was 25 years old. Fresh out of law school, had no idea. Looking back at it, I have no regrets. I just wish that we had that there were more of us. But the one thing one thing I learned in walking this path is that it's not for everyone, and that's okay. People have roles, and along the journey, a lot of people played different roles in providing support. But there are those that had to continue the search, because part of the problem is you don't know the extent of the problem. You don't know how many museums out there have remains. People always ask me, do you think your work is done? My answer is honestly, we have no idea. We have no idea whether we've addressed the problem effectively or we're just scratching the surface. Because we don't know how extensive the thievery was. And one reason why I like to come to panels like this and to forums like this is to network with other Indigenous people who's gone to institutions sometimes we never even heard of, to find out what their experiences were like, and then to follow up with those institutions to make sure that Native Hawaiians' remains weren't there. And so it's still an ongoing. For example, last year in Dresden, Germany, we completed a repatriation case that took 26 years to resolve. The very next day, we were in Berlin meeting with a museum that had informed us that they also had our ancestors' remains. The day after, we closed the chapter on the 26-year effort. Two new cases opened up. So that's the nature of this work, is that we just don't know. And part of this, I would say the greatest tool or weapon, if you will, in this effort is our own sense of humanity. Is understanding that our connection to our ancestors and our cultural values is the ultimate authority. In the international cases that we've done, the majority of those countries do not have laws that authorize repatriation. That is not an issue for us, because our cultural values of ohana, of family, is what controls. We don't have to. There was no law in Germany that required them to repatriate. We convinced them to. Mm-hmm. And so the message that, whenever I speak at these forums is, your greatest tool is your own culture and your own sense of humanity, and your ability to convince the person sitting across the table that those past actions or transgressions against your humanity, and that repatriation is an invitation for that institution to elevate their level of humanity. And that is the beginning of a discourse, not the end, the beginning. We are fellow occupants of the planet Earth. We insist on our humanity, and we will do our best to elevate ours. And I'll pass this back to you.
everyone. My name is Honor Keeler from Cherokee Nation, Oklahoma, and I currently live in the West. I've learned a great deal from the people sitting around me about repatriation, about what it takes spiritually, what it takes from those around you, and what it takes to continue to do repatriation. I'm here in Canada as a result of Donna and Diane Longboat's insistence to come to bring us all here together. But I think it's very important that we are here together in this room, and that all of you are here together in this room to hear about how extensive this issue is for Indigenous peoples. Our ancestors and cultural items, almost across the board from Indigenous communities, have been taken, exhumed from the ground where they've been buried, and moved into collections and museums all over the world. Some folks estimate that nearly 1 million Indigenous ancestors and cultural items have been taken. And this continuance within museums and collections across the world is a continuance of disrespect and inhumanity against Indigenous peoples. And I think many of us have come here today to talk to you about this, to spread the word about this, and to help our ancestors and sacred items and their funerary objects and cultural patrimony to come home. Hale Aloha has said that it can be difficult, doing this work, and there are only so many of us doing it. So I'm here asking for your help, because the way that we find out about our ancestors and cultural items being in different countries is from other people. So I really am glad you're here today.
Thank you, Honor. Thank you, all of you. First of all, don't feel bad if the room is almost empty. I dreamt about this. Every single person that's meant to be in here, that's in here right now, is meant to be here. I dreamt about this a long time ago, and I knew the first part there was going to be hardly anybody in there, but I'm not worried. It's okay. There's going to be another panel, international panel. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we're having an Ancestors Spirit Feast offering ceremony at the Lodge of Nations, right in the middle of, I haven't even been into the Lodge of Nations, but it's in this building. What floor is it? Or down below?
It's only at the end. If you come off the elevator towards the exhibit hall, turn right. It's there at the end of that hall.
And I want to tell you that it's, I don't know what, I have to just stand. I'm just standing for the ancestors. That ceremony that I'm going to be doing tomorrow, if you're going to come, please be on time. There's going to be only so many that can fit into that first place, the Lodge of Nations, but there's going to be people from all around. And this ceremony was handed down to me, I'll explain more tomorrow, by the late Albert Lightning Buffalo Child. He was a medicine man from Hovima, Alberta. I was so fortunate to have so many medicine people to learn from. I had learned from 4 medicine men in my life and 1 medicine woman. And he was my most influential teacher. Nobody's my spiritual teacher, my spiritual counterpart. I can't explain it. But he certainly has a strong message to share with the world. So when he does his presentation, be there. You're not going to hear it again, I'll tell you. And then tomorrow morning at the Ancestors Feast, the women have to wear skirts, like not have to. Out of respect for the spirit woman that comes to our ceremonies, we ask that the women wear skirts. So what I'd like to do first, because we're talking about the ancestors, I'll let it smudge. I'm going to sing a song for our ancestors, not just for my ancestors, but for your ancestors as well. A little pinch of tobacco. Today I do my tobacco.
know what
Melody
room yet?
Melody Talcott here too works, and she'll be here on the panel tomorrow as well. She's on the international panel as well, so you can stand up. Yes. And our friend Angelo is always backing us up when he's doing all the film work. Angelo. So he'll be here, I'm sure, tomorrow as well. So I'm going to put this tobacco, and the prayer that I said was, I asked the Creator to bring the words that I need to share today. There's so many things that could be shared, but I asked to be guided. But this song is for the ones who went before us. And the very same blood that runs through our veins is the very same blood that ran through our ancestors' veins. If you want to stand with me. The first 4 beats are for the ones who went before us. This is an ancient Mi'kmaq song, actually, Wabanaki. And each time I do a burial for the ancestors, this is the song that I sing for them. So this work that, when the ancestors first came in 1977, when I was pregnant with my second son, it has continued. I think they came and they wanted to know if I was going to listen. And I remember one person a few years ago told me, Donna, first of all, it's amazing that you receive these spiritual messages. But secondly, is that you listen to these messages. You act on these messages, and I do. Never doubt. I never doubt. They'll wake me up middle of the night. I'll sit straight up in my bed. You have to go over here. You have to go over there. And I'll go. Sometimes I don't know where I'm going to stay, how I'm going to get back. I make sure my children are okay, and I take off because I know that the ancestors are calling to me. And there's been, I work under a law on the American side. I've been trying to help establish law here in Canada. This is my 5th national chief I've gone to. 5th national chief. And this one is finally listening, and he accepted tobacco. So he's going to be tomorrow. I told him when he comes to the ceremony, come with your bundle, meaning don't come as a politician, come as a ceremonial person. Because I know that this National Chief Perry Bellegarde, he loves ceremony. And I know he's guided by ceremony. I told him that. And so tomorrow he'll be there. And so when the ancestors first started coming and asking for my help, I just listened. And they took me to places. They took me to a place, Jemseg, New Brunswick. There was a highway going through from Moncton, New Brunswick to Fredericton, New Brunswick, Trans-Canada Highway. They found, there was a bridge, and they were going to, they were going to build a bridge there, and they said artifacts. So what happened, the archaeologists were called in right away, and so they were feverishly working, trying to get all these artifacts out of there so that bridge could come through. And people had gone there, some people, Native people, and they were protesting at first. And so I heard about it, and I prayed. I lit my pipe, because everything that I do, I will pray about it first. And I prayed, and then they started coming, and I knew I had to go. They wouldn't even let me sleep. They kept pulling at me, pulling at me. So finally, but I did my homework. First of all, I didn't go there and protest. I did my homework. I contacted local press to follow me down in there because there is no law here in Canada, don't forget. There's no repatriation law. And I contacted local press to follow me down there, and then I contacted international press to let them know I'm going down in there so that I would be safe. I sent an email to all the chiefs of New Brunswick, but I was up against Native and non-Native security. I was up against all the chiefs of New Brunswick, elected chiefs, because they would not step on the toes of that chief that agreed, that was closest to his reserve. But I said, way back then, there were no reserves, there were no provinces. This is all of our ancestors. Then I was up against the New Brunswick government, who Frank McKenna was the head of the New Brunswick government at the time. All odds were against me. And I said, I'm going down in there. They promised us a teepee, they promised us a trailer, nothing, nothing. All we had was a sacred fire, a little car running on 3 cylinders, went 25 kilometers an hour all the way, putt-putting all the way, but I got there. And a lot of people followed me in, like in my dream, like an arrow. They followed me and they waited for me until I got there. And I lit the smudge and I walked ahead. Just as it was getting dark, they all left. They were all afraid to be put in jail. But I stayed. There were 4 of us. A Penobscot elder came from Maine. There was another Mi'kmaq woman that had a dream she had to come be with me. There was a young Maliseet man. He said he was driving across the bridge and his eagle flew in front of him and flipped. And he said, I heard this voice so strong, you have to go help down Augustine. He's Maliseet. So they came down. And I knew we had to do it. How would our ancestors have done it? The warriors of all the Maritimes, they were meeting the night before I left for Gemsek. They called me. They offered me tobacco. They invited me to their meeting, and they offered me tobacco to speak. And they said, we heard you're going into Gemsek. I said, yes. They said, let us, as the warriors, go in there. We're going to take it over by force. And I had to put my head down, and I said, oh, I honor you as men that you want to do that. It's your role as men to protect the ancestors, to protect the women. I honor you for taking on this role. I said, but we can never do it in this way. We can never do it with violence or even a show of violence. I said, so please, don't come unless you come as yourselves. Don't even wear those fatigues or whatever, because they'll say, oh, look at the Native people, they're protesting again, and they're going to take us away. I said, come, we're going to pray, we're going to light the sacred fire. And I was going to light the sacred fire for 4 days, but an elder, Passamaquoddy elder, told me the real sacred fire was 7 days and 7 nights. So I made a commitment to be there 7 days and 7 nights. The archaeologists are digging all around us. We had to share a porta potty. This was middle of winter, cold, rain, mud, everything. I was freezing. And I had a little gas left in my car, and I knew I couldn't leave. Some of them, the other 3 would leave a little bit, come back. I never left once. I knew I'm their leader, and if I leave, that's it. So once my gas ran out, I had very little left. We had to sleep outside right on the ground near a sacred fire. So on the 5th day, the elder had to leave to go back. On the 6th day, the Mi'kmaq woman was falling apart because they were taunting her. They were walking by like this, and they had artifacts, and they're going like this and laughing, ha, 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 like this. And then one says, let's go get these suckers dug back. Let's hurry up and get these suckers dug out of the ground. And she lost it, and she was losing it, just crying. And the spirits came. I went to the fire. The 2 men had gone. The 2 men had gone to get coffee and shave, because I hadn't shaved. They took a break, and it was just her and I. And they didn't taunt me because they knew they couldn't do anything. I don't care what they did. I was willing to give up my life down there. I was. And so, when I stood at the sacred fire, and I remember standing there like this with my tobacco, and I told the Creator, Creator, help us, help my sister. All we have here is what you gave us as the Native people. You gave us this sacred fire. You gave us this tobacco. That's all we have. Help my sister. And I offered that tobacco like this, and when I put that tobacco kind of gently went like this, and I could hear the tobacco speaking to me. And it told me, tell her she has to take a break. She has to leave a little bit. And I went to her to tell her that, and just as I was telling her, this van pulled in, a woman close by that would come and check on us, a non-native woman. She came, and I told her, and so she left with her. And so the elder had left. Now they were down to 2 of us. The young Maliseet man, the last night, he got so sick. He was already getting sick. The last night he had pneumonia. He had pneumonia. He couldn't do anything. He just laid there, and he had a high fever. But he wouldn't leave. He wouldn't leave me. And the archaeologists were intense all around us, saying, and I knew something's going to happen on that last night. I knew. And sure enough, must have been about 3 o'clock in the morning, this powerful, powerful wind came up out of the blue, and they said 85% of the power in New Brunswick went out that night. The people, the 2 elder couple, non-native couple that were in a house next to us, their power didn't go out. They didn't want the archaeologists to go in there, but they were forced. They were given a piece of paper. They said, you have no choice. It's a government order. My house, where I live, and my children, the power did not go out in my house. Even my other brothers went there, or whatever. Power went out everywhere, all around. My house, the power was still on, because the Creator watched over my children as I'm doing this work. And on that last night, this powerful wind came up. It just so powerful. And I told them we have to build up the sacred fire. We went to the sacred fire and started to pray. And I started to sing, and all of a sudden I was by that fire, and as I looked, their things were tense. There was things that they had these, I called them concentration camps. They had these grave things over where they were digging, so they could dig all through the night, and so that the people going by wouldn't see what they're doing. All night long, they were digging feverishly, trying to finish this up. And they were just going like this, bits and pieces, flying all over everything. The sweat lodge where we were, our circle that I had made with tobacco, nothing ruined. There was a little spirit dish on top of the sweat lodge, and it was shaped like a canoe like this. And that sat there, didn't even move with our spirit dish in there. Everything else was going crazy. And this man, I remember one of the archaeologists who was really taunting us, tall man, grabbed that thing that was trying to pull up like this. And that's the first time I ever told him anything. He just grabbed it, and I said, let it go, let it go. It's only a material thing. And when he let go, that thing went flying into the woods. He would have got killed. So everything was breaking. And then all of a sudden we looked in the sky. I'm sharing something here that I don't always share everywhere. It was pitch dark. It was like pitch dark. And all of a sudden the sky opened up from east to west like a smile. It just opened up like this. And in the sky, right across from east to west, I could see it was like if I could take a picture, I would have. And he stood there, that young man stood there with me. He passed away now. He looked and he's like, oh. It was like a huge whale right across from the sky. You could see the spout, everything. And then behind that whale, there was a turtle, like a sea turtle. And I want to sing a song that I sang. This song came spiritually to a man as he was carving a pipe, Don Capeland. They came just like that. And he said, I sobbed as this song was coming to me. And this, the whale is coming from the ocean. And the turtle, the sea turtle, is following close behind. They are coming to let the Mi'kmaq people know what hard times are here now. As I sing this song, know that it's a message. Bejiga after that happened, I knew, and everything, the power went out, all their stuff went flying, everything up there, man-made stuff just ruined. And, they told us, you can't stop that. The archaeologist had told me, you can't stop that bridge from coming through, because I told her you can move that bridge. No. She said, that's impossible. I told him, nothing is impossible in my book. And in the end, after all that happened, the bridge was stopped. The dig was stopped, the bridge was moved, and Trans-Canada Highway rerouted. It's like the ones that live in the United States, it's like having I-95 rerouted. And that's faith in our ways, that's faith in the sacred fire, that's faith in the what the Creator gave to us as prayer. And it's because of our ancestors. And the name that I carried at Miktich, when that spirit first came in 1977, when he came the second time with specific instructions, on the last day, 4 days, he came how to protect myself, what to do when you go to a burial site, what not to do. All those things he was preparing me for the work that I do. I didn't know that. And on the last day, he said, if you do this for us, I will let you use my name. And I didn't know what that was. Even though we did everything that he instructed, it came later in a ceremony where we were honoring an eagle that was given to our community. We had the eagle laying on top of our sweat lodge, and we were inside. And that name that came is Miktich. My spirit named Thunderbird Turtle Woman said that turtle is Miktich. That name comes from an ancestor from that burial site that goes back about 3,000 years. That's a long time ago. That's before Christ. So I carry the name of an ancestor that lived 3,000 years ago. He's with me. He's with me right now. He's with me when not only for me, he's with me when the people need strong prayers. I've seen it. There was almost a civil war in my community of political fractions. They were going to come together. They were going to kill one another. It was really, really bad. There was a few people provoking. And I knew at that moment. And I told the Creator I had to go and stand in the middle. I had to stand in front of a bulldozer. And I knew that people had guns in the woods and everything. And I told the Creator, these are all my people. Help me help all my people. My son dreamt about it 2 weeks before that, 2 months, and he knew. And I had to stand by myself, and my son came to stand behind me spiritually. And at that time, I sang the honor song for all of our people. And when I sang that, my sister Bernadette said, you should have seen the people running. They were just running away because they realized, what are we doing? What are we doing? And so I don't take that name humbly. I don't take it for granted. I'm very humble about it. I don't take this work for granted. I don't do it alone. There's others that work with me. On the American side, on the U.S. side, that I work under that law, I don't get paid for it. I tell people I don't get paid with money. My payment comes when I take those ancestors that have been on shelves in museums, sometimes over 100 years, have been studied, scraped, boiled, desecrated. When they dig them up out of the ground, it's like telling us as Native people, you're not worthy of respect. And when we go and we get those ancestors back, and Eddie, you must know what I mean, honor. And when we bring them home and we put them back into the earth, and once, especially children, and once that first bit of earth touches them, we don't bury them with shovels. We bury them with our hands. And once that first bit of earth touches them, we know that their spirits are set free. That's my payment right there. And I tell people, I will do this work until my last breath. The late Arnie Neptune that came to be with us, that elder at the burial site, he did do this work to his last breath. He's gone now. There was another elder that's gone. But I will do this always. And I'm so honored tomorrow to do an ancestor ceremony. It's not just for my ancestors, it's for all of our ancestors. And 3 nights before I came here, they came to me. Thousands of ancestors, thousands came to me. They're there, they're waiting. Last night they came. My son, we were just in that room. My son, Gitpo, called. And he said, Mom, I had this incredible dream. My son is just starting to wake up again. He was on a little wrong path there for a while, but he's come back, and he's strong now. I won't tell you, David, because I know David's going to train him. But he told me, Mom, I had this powerful dream. He knew where I was sitting, You know, I went to get that phone call, went and sat on those little steps outside was even cold. I got back up and I had to go into the side room, and he said, you were walking, you were sitting on a step, you went into the side room. He knew. His spirit came and he saw where I was, and he said, Mom, something is going to happen that has never happened before. So tomorrow, come to the ceremony. We're going to pray for all of our ancestors, all of your ancestors in your direct line. The blood that runs through our veins is the very same blood that ran through our ancestors' veins. At this ceremony, our ancestors that you carried, each and every one of you carried, from the beginning of time. Not just your grandparents, and the ancestors are everybody who passed away before you. Your mother, your daughter, if somebody had a miscarriage, whatever, all of them are going to be there in your bloodline. From the beginning of time are going to be called in. And that's why I urge people to please be on time and don't leave if you can. Try to use the bathroom. If you do go bathroom, come right back before they call back. It's such a beautiful ceremony that all the ancestors will come. I was instructed and trained for years that if there's babies sleeping or children, we have to wake them up, because when the spirits come in, we're not going to see them. But children are so innocent, they might see them. And they're so beautiful, they might want to follow them. So I'd like to invite you to come tomorrow. But all what's happening in this whole place, people are working together. I don't know how much time do we have? Lots. I want to, okay. I'm taking up so much of the panel's time. Is that okay? Okay. There's so many stories I could share now. I even forget what just kind of went through my mind. But there's so many spiritual things that have happened as I do this work that it's hard to describe. But we are all guided. We are all guided spiritually. All of us. We came from somewhere before we came to this earth. From somewhere, and we're all going back somewhere. And what the elder Jim Dumont said this morning, we don't have a perception of like hell. We don't. We're going to go back into the spirit world. And so our ancestors, we believe that, and the message came that when the people pray, when they raise their tobacco to pray, I was doing my dishes, something that is not my favorite thing in the world to do, in my kitchen. And a feeling came, real strong feeling. I dried my hands, and I went outside. And when I went outside, I stood near this tree, this smudge street grass. And the message came that when the people raise their tobacco to pray, when the people raise their pipes to pray, it is us as spirits that they are asking for help. They told me, now, we as spirits are asking for your help. And I know that means the people. Here, close by, there's museums. And so if you should be in a city, go to a museum, even if you go outside, offer tobacco. Say a little prayer when you walk by, especially the native people of this land. We're the most studied people on the face of this earth, more than any other race. I don't know what it is that they're looking for. They're all looking for the ultimate find. And I tell them, you don't need to study our ancestors to tell us who we are. We already know who we are, you know. And they're looking for the ultimate find, to write the books, whatever. And I think a part of it is they're trying to prove that we were not here first because of land claims and so forth. But we have been here since time immemorial. Wherever people were placed, they have been there. The Creator placed us where we were meant to be. And so everywhere we walk on Turtle Island are the remains, the ashes of our ancestors, the ones that went before us. When we honor our ancestors, we honor the deepest part of ourselves, of who we are. And we don't have to be afraid. When we turn on the TV, all the scary shows and all that, that's not real. We don't have to be afraid of the spirits. I'll be afraid of human beings. They can knock me down, they can punch, they can talk about me. We don't have to be afraid of spiritual things at all. And when you have complete faith in the Creator, like my teacher, the late Albert Lightning said, have complete faith in the Creator. When you have complete faith in the Creator, you have to be afraid of anything. You don't have to be afraid that somebody's going to put a whammy on you or anything. Who's stronger than the Creator? Nobody. Nobody. We don't have to be afraid. If I was afraid, I wouldn't be able to have gone to half the places I've been to, different parts of the world. And I was very surprised when the ancestors first came. I thought it was just Mi'kmaq ancestors. Then when they called me the state of Maine, the Wabanaki, which is Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot. Who am I forgetting? Mi'kmaq, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, Wabanaki, Maliseet. 5 tribes. I thought it was the Wabanaki. Then I got to be on the NAGPRA review board. Then it was to help the other tribes. But then Spirit started coming to me from other countries. A little boy from Italy came. I went to Europe and Slovenia, the island of Bled. Their ancestors came to me asking for my help. When I went to Norway with the Viking, the Sami people and their ancient burial sites, their most ancient burial sites, the Viking burial ship sites, those women came to me for help. So I realized it's not just our people that want help. Nobody should be on a shelf in a museum. When those ancestors were placed in the ground, they were buried by their mother or their loved ones with the most love and respect. And items were placed with them for them to use in the spirit world, because we have so much belief in the spirit world. Those items, those burial goods, burial items, funerary objects that are buried with the dead, no longer belong to this world. They belong to the spirit world. They don't belong in a case in a museum. Our ancestors don't belong in a university being used for teaching tools. They are very sacred. They are very, very sacred. And so I tell people we are now in a time of reconciliation, because the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I tell people true reconciliation cannot happen without first reconciling with the land and with the ancestors. So tomorrow I hope you come. I'm going to see if anybody else wants to share anything. Eddie, or did you want to share something? Just, you want to talk and stick on? It's up to you. Just
I think one of the important lessons we've also learned when I first started in this work, I was a law clerk at the Native American Rights Fund in Boulder, Colorado, and I was working for a Native American attorney named Walter Eckelhawk, and he was working on 2 repatriation cases for the Pawnee tribe that he's from, and occurring at that same time occurring in Hawaii was I had mentioned earlier the disturbance on the island of Maui, and one of the lessons that came forward when we first started our work was the inherent fear that in our Native community about working with the dead. And so a lot of Hawaiians, even though they opposed the digging of the iwi, they didn't want to get involved in the actual care of them. And so one way I explain it today, looking back after 29 years, is, I always try to encourage our Hawaiian people not to fear your ancestral shadow, because that's the shadow of our grandparents, and there's nothing fearful about our grandparents. Their willingness to care for us when they were alive is the same willingness that they have now that they've passed on. And so what we were trained to do in our work is to call on them for help, call on them by name, because by calling on them, by requesting their guidance, by giving them function again, they live on. We were also trained that when we started a repatriation case, we would start from envisioning the result. So when, like the Dresden case, another case took us 23 years, involved the Natural History Museum in London. We started off that case envisioning the result, the reburial ceremony. I mean, in my dream, I saw someone that I know who was, who was present when we did the actual reburial 23 years later. He was actually there, near, but he was in the ocean diving. He was catching fish for our meal, our post-ceremonial meal. So when the ceremony was about to start, I was like, oh no, this is not the way I dreamt it. And as we were driving to the ceremonial site, this young boy was walking along the road, and he was asked to come with us. Well, when we got to the site, I realized that was Kanoho's son.
Oh.
And I thought, dreams aren't supposed to be, actual, not literal, but they give you insight into what's happening. And so in the ceremony, I asked him to come forward and to be the one to return, this kupuna to the Aina, to return, in the search of this one Hawaiian skull. We ended up bringing home 144 of them from the Natural History Museum, from a country, I don't know if any of you've dealt with the United Kingdom, with England, which can be a daunting task. Everything takes time. Any question will take a year to answer. They have all the time in the world to deal with anything that they're not comfortable with. And it took us a long time to resolve this. But, what we try to do is recognize that the role our ancestors have in giving us the tools we need, the inspiration, the insight, the courage. I was involved in a case where I was threatened with incarceration, and actually incarcerated. And when the judge made that decision in the courtroom, I responded by saying, I would be honored. He says, I'm going to incarcerate you indefinitely. Do you know what indefinitely means? And my response was, I would be honored. Because he was trying to force us to undo a reburial that we had done. And I tried to explain to him that we were created for the purpose of undoing the injustice, not creating a new one. And that if he truly, truly stood for the law of the land, then he would not be allowing the disturbance of this burial site. And so there are numerous challenges along the road. Another, which is probably for me, probably the most difficult, is the time that it takes away from your family. The time that it takes away for your family. So during those years, the woman I was with at the time, I would tell them, if you want to be involved with me, you have to know that I have this commitment, and that when it calls, like eloquently explains, there is no choice. You have to go. If you expect their help, then you have to provide yours. Our work was intended to help restore our ancestral foundation. My grandmother, when I first started this work, told me, and the effort wasn't to do repatriation, it was to help restore our kingdom, help restore our sovereignty. And she told me, in effect, the house cannot be restored unless the foundation is firm. At first I didn't understand what she meant. She said, if you expect to restore the lahui, the nation, then you have to start at the foundation. And she said, one reason why we've fallen, to the wayside is because we're weak. And we were weakened by the taking of our foundation, and undermining of that. So if your commitment is to the lahui, is to the nation, then bring the ancestors home. And our work also involved helping other indigenous people do the same. So the Bishop Museum in Honolulu had a large non-Hawaiian collection of human remains. And we helped repatriate almost all of them, to the point where the museum's entire collection of human remains is pretty much repatriated. Now, those non-Hawaiian remains are outside of the NAGPRA law. But again, laws are not required. Helpful, definitely. In the UK, it was helpful, but not required. I would always tell the other people, just put me in the room with the museum officials. Just let me get them. Because I may not be able to convince them, but they will feel our pain. Because the challenge is how to get them to connect to their humanity. Because once that connection happens, like what we did with our article in Germany, once that happens, we're not that different as people. We're not. How we feel about our family, those non-native museum people feel the same way about their family. Their ancestors are not in their museums. Sorry. So, the point is, as long as you can make those connections, then the magic happens.
Are we able to ask any questions?
Yes. If people want to say something, yes.
First of all, thank you, all of you, 4 of you, to be here. We're really honored to have you. Have you found in your research that any organizations are offering you assistance, any sort of like museum type of organizations or any archaeological or in the United States? I'm from California. We have a lot of indigenous groups in California. And my understanding is that Canada is a lot more advanced in terms of their relations and reconciliation with your First Nations people than we really are in the United States. But then, Donna, you were saying that the laws are kind of against you to try to repatriate and do some of these things, and then some of the laws in the United States are helpful. And I'm trying to understand, because I'm kind of new to all of this information, and I'm wondering what can we do to not only notice when artifacts are in museums, but to try to convince organizations to assist you in doing this?
Well, first of all, I always tell people, the United States is far ahead of Canada as far as repatriation. There is no national law here. We're only covered province to province, usually under the Cemeteries Act. So after 75 years or 100 years, they can dig up our ancestors, just like that. And they are not required by law to give us back our ancestors. I was on a task force on museums and First People here in Canada, around just a little after NAGPRA law had started, and for 2 years. And we went across the land. I didn't miss one meeting. And how I got on there was spiritual as well. And they told us at the time, the museums told us, oh, no, we don't have to adopt the law such as NAGPRA law because there's too many discrepancies in that law. Just take it pretty well from the goodness of our hearts. We're going to give things back to you. Well, I'll tell you, they've given back peanuts because they're not mandated to do it. So they have to do it. And that doesn't even involve the universities that our ancestors are at. So really nothing has happened. We're far ahead of the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation, as far as like residential schools, recognizing that. Canada's far ahead of the United States with that. But the United States is farther ahead on repatriation. But I tell people, when you take the children away from our families like they did in residential schools, the children represent our future. But when you take our ancestors out of the ground and you hold them hostage, that's our past. That's our identity. And as you mentioned, Eddie, what your grandmother said, this is what I always say, that I tell this to the chiefs when I go nationally. I tell them, here you are, I see it like a tree. On top of that tree, you're talking about treaty rights, hunting rights, so forth, right? But if you don't take care of the root of that tree, which is our ancestors, a big wind can come along and all of that will fall down. I was telling that to my friend, Lynn Francis. We're on our way, for the first time, somebody from my community followed me to go do a repatriation. And so she's taken her cart because it's winter and she had a 4-wheel drive. So we're driving in through Salmon River Road, and I'm telling her this. As I told her this, since we were kids, in Salmon River Road, it used to be it's like a shortcut back road. And it used to be all dirt road way back. But we still take that shortcut. And there's a tree. When you get to that tree, that big, big tree, you know that there's a spring there. You can stop and get water. Well, it's been there forever. We're driving, and I'm just telling her this, and I just told her. She said, oh, que camada. When we looked, that big tree was down, and its roots were exposed. And she was like, then, you know, it was something else. So we have to take care of our ancestors. And just a really quick story. I want to tell you about the late Sam Little, Ronald Little. He worked on repatriation as well. He was a medicine man from North Dakota. And he said, Donna, he said, when I started working on this, he said, I didn't realize how important it was or whatever until something happened. He was a medicine man, so he does ceremonies. He received a call. He said, somebody from Navajo country called him, and a woman, and she's crying on the phone. She said her daughter, they had put her in a mental institution because she had had these severe, severe headaches on one side, and they took her doctor they tried everything, doctor to doctor, whatever. Finally, they just thought she's crazy, and they put her in a mental institution. She said, my daughter is not crazy. You have to help me. So she asked if they could bring her out, and she asked if Sam Little could go there, do a sweat. He said, okay, you do it this way, prepare this, whatever. So he said, when I arrived there after playing, he said, you know, we had to rush, the rocks were ready. He said, I just had a chance to grab even a half a sandwich, half a cup of coffee, went right into the sweat lodge. We never had a chance to talk. When we were in there, he said, as soon as that flap closed, he said, the spirits came in right away. And he says, whoa. So when the flap opened, he said, a spirit came in here. And he said, the spirit said, the reason why my great-great-granddaughter is experiencing such severe headaches, she said, because I am in a museum, and they take shavings off the side of my skull to study me. I am in this town, at this museum, on this floor, this box number. And when he told them that, they took off. They left and they went towards that museum, and they asked for the head person, and they told them what happened, and they didn't know what to say. They took them to that floor, and they went, and there was that drawer when they pulled it out. Here she was. So when they just gave that ancestor back to them, they didn't know Nacra, nothing. They just freaked them out. So and he did the reburial of that ancestor. He said as soon as that ancestor was reburied, the headache stopped of that person. And he said, Donna, then I realized what happens to our ancestors on those shelves in those museums. What they feel, we're going through. So when our people are feeling, when Native people are feeling despondent, taking their own lives, they're feeling forgotten about, they're feeling undervalued. That's because the spirits of our ancestors, our root, are feeling that. And it is affecting us as the living people today. It's just like what our ancestors went through, what our parents went through, my dad went through in residential school when they were severely abused in awful, grotesque ways. And then what they went through affects us. So they said, Donna, then I knew. And then he knew. And he spent the rest of his life, he passed away too, doing this type of work. So this, and my first time in the Smithsonian, I'm sorry, I'll get back to your question, maybe somebody else will answer it, but a Passamaquoddy man and I, Daryl Newell, we walked into, NAGPRA had just started, we weren't even designated then, we had just started. So we had gone to Washington, D.C., and we asked if we could go into the back of the museum. They have their own separate law. They're not covered under NAGPRA law. But we went in there to ask if we could go in there to pray for our ancestors. So they allowed us to. And when we walked in, we had to pretty well really humble ourselves. Just rows and rows, like 15 feet high, of boxes of ancestors of this tribe and that tribe. It's just, oh, it's just so whatever. And there's other races there as well, but mostly Native people. So we asked if they could leave us alone for a while. We couldn't let us smudge. So left us alone and brought out 2 boxes of what they thought ancestors from the state of Maine. We started to pray and sing a song, and they were touching me all over. After I sang the song, I turned over to Daryl and I said, they told me something in a language, but it's not Mi'kmaq. I said, does this mean anything in Passamaquoddy? And I said, they told me twice, really strong. I heard a man say it twice so distinctly, Wujuk Geminen. And they said it again, Wujuk Geminen. And he looked at me. Oh man, tears started coming down his eyes. He said, yes, that means help us. So, 2 years ago, I took my little Honda Fit, put the seats down, lined it with cedar. Him and I took off, and finally, we drove all the way to Washington, D.C. to get those two ancestors and another ancestor. We took them back, and when we were walking in, carrying them to our burial, we had other ancestors. I said, well, we had them at the front, and I'm carrying that box of ancestors walking down, and I looked at them, terrible, we heeded their call. We're breaking them back. It's like they're going back home to be with their loved ones in the spirit world. We heeded their call. We're doing this. So I don't know if anybody else has an answer to her question or something to say. Do you want to say something on it?
Yeah, so there are things going on in different indigenous communities that have to do with international repatriation. Donna, Augustine, and Renee Aloha Ayau have been part of this working group that had started a number of years ago among indigenous communities, and it's sort of turned into a repatriation coalition more recently. In addition to the necessity to bring our ancestors home from foreign museums around the world, there's also trafficking problems happening throughout the United States and Canada, where our sacred places, our burial sites, are being looted. And typically, when this happens, it happens on private land in the U.S., on federal lands, where there isn't enough law enforcement to be monitoring these areas, and state lands, or provinces, I guess, here. And there's a network that runs out of the country. And we think it takes about 9 years, 7 to 9 years, in order for those items, those cultural items and ancestors to go into the market. And there's a private art market of our people that are being sold. There's a private art market of our funerary items and cultural items, sacred items that are being sold. And we go back to talking about dignity and respect, humanity. And something that's talked about in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is free, prior, and informed consent. And that free, prior, and informed consent has not ever been given by our people, by our ancestors, to be treated in this way. And our free, prior, and informed consent is not given now to the sale of our ancestors and cultural items or retention in museums. So there's a huge movement among indigenous peoples to restore that respect to our people, to the people who went before us. And you know, every time, a lot of times we've made connections to different people around the world, and it's been through those folks that we've been able to bring our ancestors and cultural items home. So I think what you're asking is, what can be done? How can you do this? Connect with us, talk with us. A lot of communities have repatriation officers there who are often overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed by the amount of development that's going on in their ancestral lands and their homelands. There's one person to deal with sometimes 60 environmental impact statements, and I don't know if you know what those look like, but there are pages about that thick. There's a huge process, a federal process that people go through, and repatriation. So any way to alleviate that for indigenous communities, to get more people working on it, who are trained by elders and people who do repatriation, is helpful. So thank you for asking.
Honka, Richard Moya, and I was just going to ask, thank you all for this. I was going to ask the woman who's from California, where part of California are you from?
Oh, I live in San Diego.
That's where my people are.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you want, I'm just saying, as you, bouncing off what you said, you may want to contact the nation, the nation, because they're doing a lot of work in their matriation. And as you said, the big thing they need is resources, to be honest. So if you are part of an organization or part of a group, I would say connect and see if there's some way you can support them already. That's what's really needed, yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah, yes.
I want to come to the ceremony tomorrow morning, and I want to give all the ancestors the proper respect they deserve. But I didn't bring a skirt with me.
We can do it, we'll bring a couple extra.
Oh, that would
I've got one.
That would be absolutely amazing. Thank you very much.
We have it here or in the morning, just to see Melody, yes, okay?
So tomorrow evening is the ceremony that David's going to give his prophecy at 7. But do we know where that is?
Yes.
And then there's a
Nations.
ceremony in the morning as well.
Yes,
The
both
ceremony in the
Lodge of
morning is
Nations.
9 o'clock and can't be late for that one. And what time is?
7 o'clock?
Do you know what?
Lodge of Nations.
Oh, it's a
Same
Lodge of
place.
Nations?
Lodge of
It's a lot
Nations,
of,
8th floor.
Lodge of Nations.
It's a
On the 8th floor.
reproduction.
So
it's a-
7
In this
a.m.
building,
and
8th floor,
7
yes.
p.m.
Pardon?
9 a.m.,
Oh, 9.
7 p.m.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes. And in the morning, wear a skirt. And I think the Medewan, we're so grateful that the Medewan people have offered to put up their replica of Lodge of Nations here. They don't always do that, but I know it is their protocol that women have to wear skirts, so that's good that you mentioned that. We'll brought a few, and if you don't, sometimes you can just take a shawl or something, wrap it around you as well, to represent the skirt.
The Mi'kmaq tribe, man can't speak in the longhouse without a woman speaking before him. And my wife will be speaking before me, before I speak. And that is tradition. Yeah. And I tell people when they come to any ceremony, be very respectful. And some of the things that we do normally is disrespect for the elders. You don't point. You don't whisper in front of an elder, things like that. I just tell people be respectful, because a lot of the times I'm out in your world and I don't get so much. I get a lot of disrespect out there when I'm speaking to non-native groups. So just be very aware. These people here has offered their life to find our ancestors, and when you greet them today, make sure you do it with respect. I know that's asked me. I think I'm the younger of the group here, so my apologies. But it's my duty just to say.
Depends which way you're counting.
And I want to say that it's not easy doing this, like honored, working on international repatriation. I know that a few times she has called me when she worked at university to go and smudge the ancestors that had been held in a university, just to smudge them. Oh, they gave her such a hard time, like really serious, they gave her such a hard time. So hats off to honor, and we can talk more. And we're going to have another panel. When is that panel again? Maybe you can write this down. For the International Repatriation Panel, will be
November 5th.
Helle is speaking.
Ale is speaking
Saturday?
tomorrow at
3,
3. Yep.
room 650.
room 650. Okay.
Something to remind you about our remains in museums. People say, where are they? Any museum that deals with archaeology has native remains. Every one of them. Yeah, even the smallest ones. We have some museums up in northern Maine, and they have very small museums there. I think the Abbey has some, and a couple other places out there. And they say, oh, we're doing it with respect, but bury them. Have somebody come and pick them up. Bury them.
Well, many cultures around the world are going to the British Museum, Smithsonian, because a lot of their artifacts, not just human remains, they want back in their countries. They were taken legally, illegally, under the table, paid a lot of money. And so I know the British Museum has been fighting Iran and many other places. So it's a long journey for not only the human remains but for the artifacts to be back. I know South America, many places are trying to get back.
Look at the Hopi with their sacred mask. Everybody knew it was on CNN quite a few years ago, and they're auctioning off their sacred masks, even though they really needed those, and they told them they're alive and very needed by the people, and they're objects of cultural patrimony, meaning they're needed by the tribe, but they just would not listen.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about a lot of these issues over the next, I guess, 4 days, really. Halle is going to speak more on the Native Hawaiian issues tomorrow. And then on Monday, we're having 2 sessions, one in the Lodge of Nations, which is going to be more of a traditional setting, like tomorrow. Oh, and I just want to let everyone know, don't record anything or take photos tomorrow.
Yes, at ceremony.
During the ceremony.
No pictures.
And then on Monday evening, there's going to be a large discussion with PowerPoints and everything about some of the laws that go into repatriation in the U.S., the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
And Eddie has a film too, right? It's very popular. Going to be showing that?
Now I know.
Okay, good.
So,
But not in the Lodge of Nations because
No.
it's for the ceremony, but in the other room. What room is that going to be?
I'm not sure which one
But it'll be international repatriation.
It's room 605, 4:15 on Monday.
Monday.
4:15 on
National
Monday, room
Repatriation
605.
Panel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Melody's also part of that group as well.
And I'd like to invite everyone also to a Bears Ears.
Oh, yes.
When is that?
I think that's on Monday as well.
Let
Or
me
there's
look,
a
let
Sunday
me
one.
look.
Angelo? Angelo Baca is going to be speaking with his film. He's a filmmaker, PhD at NYU, and he works at Utah Diné-Bikéyah, where I work. And everyone's going to be speaking about protecting the Bears Ears sacred landscape, which has been reduced significantly by the Trump proclamation. And
Maybe they'll
fighting
get zinc,
for it.
get zinky and then get it back.
So that will be Sunday? Sunday as well.
Are you gonna show the film?
Okay, so I think that's it, eh? Yes. So I think we'll end it here, but I'm going to end it with a little closing prayer. It's very important to us when we request something that we also have a little prayer. But then I'm going to come down, if you don't mind, and I'm going to shake your hand. I have to touch you. When I share something spiritual, like some of the spiritual stories I just told you, I can talk. I was told that I could talk to people all day, but when your hands touch, if there's anything, I always try to keep my spiritual messages as pure as possible. I don't want to add or take away. So when I touch you, my spirit tells your spirit the rest of the story or whatever. My spirit speaks to your spirit. We connect. So I want to say thank you in language on behalf of all of us. Even though we're up here, we're all doing this together. Even when I do sweat lodges, I tell people I might be sitting in a driver's seat, but I'm no higher than anybody else. We're all doing this together. We're all human beings here. And I think our most important role is to be kind to one another and respect ourselves and respect everyone.
Thank you for heeding the call, each of you.
Oh. Thank you. Oh. And I think when, being here, it's like that cellular memory, it's going to reawaken something in you. Your ancestors are going to start to speak to you. Really, you'll feel them. You'll feel them. Agiso kolalitan, igato sa samiti jalgisi. Kolalitan del mawali, kigmided metadin yung kuwait neva. Uchig nagcha mishan lukta kolali. Apkades nagcha mishan lukta kolali. Etkus nagsaol kumiskis na ni kolali tangili. O ad nagcha mishan lukta nade kolali. Kishna mami ko kolali tangili yung kuwait. Kolali kumiskis na iksaol. Tangili kolali. Also know all my relations, for we are all related. Oh, thank you. Oh, so I'm going to go down and I'm going to shake your hand.